So at this point, I think it's pretty safe to say that my journey to creating a B2 is definitely on the home stretch. The last couple of months have really been spent focusing on getting him cosmetically complete, getting the body panels textured, painted, and weathered. All of that was very much a new process for me. I went through some trials and tribulations, some false starts, some changes in tactics as I went. So I wanted to use this as an opportunity to kind of take a deep dive into the process that's kept me busy for the last couple of months. Overall, I am 100% satisfied with how he turned out. I don't think there's anything that I would want to do differently. The degree of texture that I was able to create is exactly what I had hoped to achieve. With texturing, you can take it as subtle or as strong as you want. I definitely wanted my texture to be a little more severe. I wanted it to be a little bit more pronounced. So you get a lot more of the relief that comes through once you get around to doing the weathering. I did try a couple of different methods that I'll get into in a little bit, but ultimately the method that I chose ended up being very effective and really not that difficult to do. As for the paint, I went back and forth and did some tests on paint colors. There are some colors that are pretty common choices, and I'll detail some of that. And then finally the weathering. This was the first time that I had ever weathered anything, and it was definitely fun. I started with the panels on the bottom, and I think I went a little heavy-handed there. But as I progressed, it really kind of became a very relaxing and zen process. So anyway, we've got the finished product here, but let me take a step back in time and show you guys where I was a couple of months ago. So when it comes to adding texture to your B2, there's two main products that you can try using. I've actually used both now, and I do have a clear preference, and we'll get to that in a little bit. On the right, you've got just your typical drywall joint compound. This is easily found just about everywhere. Any hardware store is going to have it. A tub like this is going to run you probably under 20 bucks. It's applied with just a simple putty knife. Pro, it's very easy to use. There's no mixing required. Pro and con would be the unlimited working time. It's a pro because it gives you as much time as you want to sculpture in your texture. But on the con side, it does require about 24 hours to dry. So if you're doing a large piece, you might have to do it in sections and wait a day for it to dry before you can go on to the next. This sample piece here is just an extra ankle that I have. This has been painted and clear coated and even a little bit of weathering applied. And you can see that the texture detail is really nice. This is basically what I did for all of the lower panels, and I'll show you how those held up in a little bit. On this side though, you've got your two-part body filler. Now I've got stuff there from Evercoat, stuff from JB Weld. You can also get stuff from Bondo. All of these basic two-part body fillers, the ones that don't have fiberglass or anything else mixed into them, are going to be a little bit more expensive. They'll run anywhere from, say, $20 to $30 or more. They'll come with a tube of the cream hardener. All of these are basically the same formula, so you can use Bondo cream hardener and the JB Weld and so forth. You'll want to get some plastic spreaders to use to apply them. And this is a test piece that I have. Now this test piece looks dramatically different because it does not have a clear coat and it does not have any weathering. But if you look at the texture detail, for all intents and purposes, the texture that you can get with the body filler is basically the same as what you can get with the joint compound. You'll be able to achieve the same results with either method. So obviously though, the drawback to the two-part body filler is the reduced working time. You get about 3, maybe 4 minutes of working time before it's unusable. That can also be a pro though, because whereas with the joint compound, you've got to wait 24 hours to move on to another section. With the body filler, you can probably accomplish more in a few hours than you can with the joint compound. So let's go take a look real quick at the lower body panels that I did using the joint compound and show you how they turned out and how they're holding up. So here we see B2 with the lower panels installed. These were all textured using the joint compound and then just weathered with typical acrylic paints. Now, with the exception of the front and the rear panel, which is sitting over there, the rest of these are all pretty much semi-permanently installed in B2, and they are a real challenge to get installed and fastened into place. If we look here in the back, you'll see, right there, there's that little nut right there. There's a fastener that goes in from the side in there. It really is kind of important to have that in there. I found that it helped pinch the two sides together and made alignment of the end panels a lot easier. But in order to get those fastened, I had to take my relays out, which made things a little bit more difficult. In addition, these ankles are held in place with 2 screws underneath, as well as that one tucked back in there. And even when you have the feet fully extended, you need to remove these pockets in order to get those bolts in. So it's definitely a challenge to get those in. So as I mentioned, all of these panels were textured using the joint compound. And although I was really happy with the end result, I have not been happy with the durability. You actually get a sense of that back here. It's starting to chip away where the rear panel attaches to the body. And in fact, if we look over here at the rear panel, you'll see that I've already had a big chunk of the texture just pop up. Now, I don't think I scuffed up the underside here. At least if I did, it certainly wasn't done well enough. But we can also look over here on this side here. And if you look closely, that's already starting to separate completely there. In fact, there you go. It's coming off. So I don't think the joint compound is going to hold up long term. I'm not going to take these body panels off, certainly not the ankles and the sides. That's just too much effort at this point. But the front and rear panels, I could very well, depending on how long they last, I might just scrape off the joint compound or replace it with body filler. But since I'm not using the joint compound anymore, I won't show you how I applied that. But I still have some body panels left to texture. So let's break out the body filler and I can show you my process for applying that. All right, so the first step in the process is to scuff up all of your parts. So all that effort you put into getting beautiful quality prints off of your printer, it doesn't really matter because for these, I'm actually taking 60 grit sandpaper and very aggressively scuffing these all up. So this is a foot shell before, and this is the foot shell after. So really taking care to get all the surfaces that are going to get the filler. I want to make sure to promote the adhesion as much as possible. And this is also a time where using black filament is your friend because it's much easier to see what has been scuffed up and what has not. Unlike, however, these body panels, which I printed in white filament because that's what I had. This is where you have to be a little careful to make sure that you get a really good scuff all the way around. Now, these were the angular body panels that Michael made available, and these have rather sharp corners. Whereas if you look at B2 in the show, he had much rounded corners, and they've since released the clean panels, which have the rounded corners, much more appropriate for the show, but they still don't have the texture pattern in them. So as I'm going through here, you'll see that I am rounding over the corners as best I can. And again, the 60 grit sandpaper really helps. You really have to kind of use the lighting on the white filament to tell what has and hasn't been sanded. In fact, I think if I get this just right, you might be able to see on there, the area on the right has been sanded and the area on the left hasn't. So you can always go by feel, but when in doubt, you can also take a look at it. That's where bias light is your friend. So I've got a lot more to do. I've got to get these, this middle body panel is done. This one I still have to do, and I also still have to do his head. Now that's another nice thing about this is I'm not going to worry at all about these seams because it's all going to get covered with the body filler. So I'll have to remove the bottom piece there as well. So still got a little ways to go, but once these are all scuffed up, then they'll be ready for some filler. All right, so it's probably been about 3 or 4 hours worth of sanding outside, getting all of this stuff done. On these body panels, I made sure that I got obviously the top surfaces, but also a little bit on the bottom surfaces. I'm going to want to make sure that the texture wraps around as much as possible. Likewise, on the head, I actually did up underneath there because I intend to have the texture run all the way around. I think in the end that'll also help stabilize the corners and the edges a little bit, and hopefully that'll keep it from chipping off. So now that these parts are all prepped, we get to start applying the filler. Okay, so I've gotten a few batches of the filler on B2's head. One batch did the top, another batch did basically from about here to about there, and then a third batch to about there. So that's about how much you should expect to get done at one time. In terms of the tools and apparatus that you need, I've actually found that using these plastic spreaders is much better than trying to use a metal putty knife. No matter how hard I tried, these things just kept getting caked with dried filler. Even when I tried to clean them off right after use, the stuff sets up so quick, it really is hard to keep those clean. These, on the other hand, the stuff just peels right off even after it's cured a little bit, so it's easier to keep these clean. These also tend to be a bit more flexible, which makes it a bit easier for applying. Definitely like having the wider applicator to apply because you get a lot more on fast, which is key when you only have a few minutes of working time. I've actually found that the best way for me to measure the amount of body filler to use is just to scoop some out on this paint stick. One scoop is usually about as much as I'm going to be able to apply. And then finally, you've also got the cream hardener. I've probably been putting in a bit more than I need to, but better to err on the side of too much than too little. The little opening on here, sometimes it comes out in a nice skinny bead, other times it comes out in a big fat bead. So it just takes practice before you kind of get a sense for how much hardener is correct. So yeah, we've got a beautiful day, so we've got some nice ventilation. So this is going pretty well. Let me see if I can get someone to operate the camera, and I'll show you guys how quickly this stuff really sets up. Oh, and I also did forget to mention that you do need a non-porous surface to mix the filler on. You really don't want to use cardboard or paper for that matter. This is an old cookie sheet that we didn't need anymore. And it's actually probably, something plastic or silicone would probably be even better because I'm still getting some buildup of stuff here from my previous mixes. But definitely you want something that is non-porous and solid in order to mix the filler on. So let's go ahead and give this a try. All right, so we're going to start by taking one super scientific paint stick measure of the body filler. And we will get that onto our mixing board. This stuff definitely does stink, so you want to make sure that you do have that good ventilation. Now the correct ratio is 50-1 in terms of weight. They recommend just smearing a bead of cream hardener across the surface, but it kind of depends on whether it comes out thick or thin to how much that's going to go. That's probably good. That's a little on the thicker side. So at this point the clock is ticking. What we're going to do to mix it is fold it over. You want to fold it, not necessarily stir it. Just really work it in there. And you want to have a plan of what areas of the body panels you're going to be texturing. That's looking pretty good. Get that off here. And I've also found when I've got some hard edges, I'll usually start at the edges and pull away from there. And because B2's got these seams, we've also got these rounded edges. You really want to try and pull the filler around over the corners This is where the wide applicator really helps, because right now I just want to get it all on there. I'll worry about the texturing part a little bit. The stuff is definitely thick, a lot thicker than the joint compound. We're going to round over those corners. All right, so we've got pretty good coverage now. So what I found is really good for coming up with the texture pattern is, now that it's on here, I'll kind of make just some random impressions in here and then lightly score over them. That kind of gives it a layered kind of appearance. I can already feel it starting to get a little stiff. We are going to be coming over this with a little bit of sandpaper after it sets, just to take the edge off. That's really about all there is to it. Now this stuff is already, well, it's actually still got a little bit of working time left, but not a whole lot, so I can add. I also kind of like to give them some battle scars and stuff. All right, that's probably about good for now. The stuff still is actually workable. It's losing its flexibility at this point. But that's really, there isn't really a whole lot more working time with this stuff. This is just about done. So that's pretty much the process for applying it. I kind of do it in small sections. In the case of the foot shells, I'll do the raised sections first, and then I'll come back and kind of fill in the low spots. But you just want to kind of plan out what areas you want to try and cover in a batch, and know about how much you can cover with each paint stick full of body filler. So I'm going to continue on with this and see how far we get today. All right, so I finished applying the body filler to the hat, and it's actually had plenty of time to cure. This stuff is supposed to be sandable within about 30 or 60 minutes. This actually has been a day or so now. It's pretty rough when you touch it, but the next step is to kind of knock that back a little bit. Now with the joint compound, that stuff sanded really easily. You had to be really careful not to over sand it, at least for me, because I really want there to be a texture. So I've just got some 220 grit sandpaper, and what I will do is I will go over this. I can be a little more aggressive with the body filler because it is so firm, but really just kind of knock down the edges. If we've got spots where things are hanging off a little bit, I really need to sand them down, I could even take an X-Acto knife to it. But at this point, it really kind of is up to you how smooth you want it. I've seen some bees that are pretty smooth with only a tiny bit of texture. On the other hand, I really kind of want there to be some texture, and I'm hoping that the weathering is really going to bring out some of that detail. So I will knock that back a little bit. And then when it comes to paint, so there are two. Well, this is the standard color that a lot of people use. This is Rust-Oleum Paprika. This is a great color. I've seen some beautiful bees with that particular color. What I found, though, at my Home Depot was I found this Morocco Red from Behr, and it's about $1 more a can. I think these are about $8 a can, and this was maybe like $9 a can. This is a flat paint. This is a semi-gloss or satin. I love the way that flat paints go on. I always have much more success with them. They cover very evenly and very smoothly. Now the Behr is a slightly darker color than the Paprika, and the process of weathering is likely to darken the overall tone of your droid. So with that in mind, I am definitely using white primer instead of my typical gray primer. I just don't want the gray primer to darken the paint any more than it absolutely needs to. So I don't think you can go wrong with either one. Paprika is a common choice. I really like the Morocco Red. So yeah, that's where I'm gonna go. I'm gonna sand this down, lay down some primer, lay down some top coat, and then we'll be ready to Oh yeah, and then I'll also put a satin clear over top of it before I do any weathering. So yeah, let's get started on that, and I'll come back with another update. All right, so B's hat has been primed, painted, and has a coat of satin clear over top. Now you want to make sure that you put the clear coat on, especially over a flat paint, before you do any weathering. That gives you a lot more control over how much of the weathering actually sticks to the paint. But I also wanted to show you this just so that you could see really how much of a difference in tone the weathering process makes. And this is, again, keep in mind when you are picking your color that it is going to be darker once you're done with the weathering, if that's what you're going to do. So that is the unweathered, and then obviously there you can see the weathering. So anyway, let me set up the table for weathering, and I'll walk you through the process that I've been using. So if you've seen many of my R2-D2 videos, it should come as no surprise that weathering is kind of a new concept for me. I kept my R2 pretty clean, but was determined to not do the same thing with B2. Instead, as you can see, I've done quite a bit of weathering so far on his body panels, and the process has been, it's been kind of a fun learning process for me. A lot of people say that your weathering should sort of make sense. It should tell a story. You know, obviously you've got things like the panel lines. You know, there's gonna be a lot of dirt and grime that assembles there, all of the little interior corners and so forth. I took a little bit further as I was doing mine, and I kind of imagined that, you know, maybe over here you've got some hydraulic fluid that kind of drips down and leaves those streaks. All of the interior panels, you know, where he's got a mechanism that raises and lowers him, I figured, you know, there's going to be some vertical weathering patterns in there. And then also with the texture, weathering is a great way to bring out some of those details, particularly around some of the deeper gouges that I've added into the texture. And then you just think about some of the surfaces that maybe get touched or handled a little bit more frequently, and they're likely to get a little bit more dirty than others. And so when you're applying your weathering, you want to make sure that you sort of take that into account and sort of plan what you're going to do. In the case of B's hat, obviously we've got these interior corners there. I anticipate there being some grime in there. He's got his little circle indentation there, which I think is where the hollow projector appears. When you see him in the show, he doesn't have a whole lot of specific weathering on the head, but you can imagine that there would be a lot of sections of where I think there's some patches where he's got some grime and some dirt buildup. In terms of the tools of the trade, so it's really pretty straightforward. I've got a little tub with some water. I've got a paper plate for mixing, a couple of paint brushes. This is the one I use the most frequently. These I will probably save for the detail weathering a little bit later. And then I've just got some basic acrylic paints. I've been using a black and a brown. And then I've also got a silver that I will use for little touch-ups a little bit later on. And basically my process has been to just sort of mix the brown and the black, dilute it a bit with the water. After I apply it, depending on how much it's diluted, will impact how long I have to wait until it really starts to set in. And then I'll just dab it with some paper towels. So let me see if I can get some camera assistance, and I'll show you the process. So obviously the process can be a little bit messy, so make sure you've got a drop cloth. And if you are kind of new to this, probably a good idea to start at the back and work your way out to the front, just because it'll take a little while to get the hang of it. So I'm just gonna dip brush in some water, mix in some of the brown and the black. And it's okay to get it really wet. It's almost like a wash. And I'm just gonna dab it into these corners here. And then grab a paper towel and wipe it away. And you'll get a feel for how much time you want to let it sit before you start to wipe away. Depending on how you've mixed the paint, you might have a little bit more time before it really starts to set. It's also why having a clear coat on here helps, because the clear coat will help keep the paint from soaking in and gives you a little bit more working time. Also go ahead and get that indentation. We want to make sure that that detail comes out. And you just kind of keep going. Another thing to keep in mind too is you can kind of start light and then always decide if you want to add more. It's easier to add more than it is to take away what you've already done. All right, so I've got the dark wash pretty much done. I'm happy with where that is. So now the last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to come back over this with a detail brush and a little bit of silver paint. And what I found that works really well is to find some of the lowest spots on him and then fill them in with the silver paint. The idea being that when the paint chips off, it doesn't chip off partially, it chips off completely. So what I will do is fill in some of these odd shapes. And I'll probably just continue going around and finding little spots. I'll probably take a break, let it dry, let it sit for a little bit, come back, take a look at it. If there's an area that I don't like, I can always just come back with some of the wash and I can cover that up again. So you've got a lot of flexibility in what you do, and you just take it as far as you feel like you want to take it. So let me wrap this up and then we'll get B put back together. So as I mentioned at the very beginning, I am absolutely 100% happy with how B turned out. I got the degree of texture that I was hoping for. I love the color. I love the weathering. This was definitely a little bit outside my normal wheelhouse, which is part of the reason that I wanted to share the experiment with you. I know everyone's droid building experience is different, and I think that's one of the beautiful things about droid building is you make the droid that you want to make. If you want it to be old and weathered, make it old and weathered. If you want it to be nice and new and shiny, make it that way. If you want to use completely different colors, it's totally up to you. Don't be afraid to experiment and try something a little bit different. You might just end up surprising yourself. So I am super happy with how B turned out. I can't wait to show them at DroidCon, which is just around the corner. I still have some work to do on B. He's got some finishing touches to do, and of course, as always, improvements and enhancements. No droid build is ever actually complete, but I will post some updates when I can. In the meantime, thanks so much. If you managed to stick through this entire video, congratulations. But I wanted to share the process that I discovered worked really, really well for me. So until next time, thanks for watching, and I'll talk to you later.